Hi, today we'll be taking a look at a real-time geolocation tracking app. We'll start by taking a look at the UX, and then we'll dive into the JavaScript to really see how everything works. On the left side here is the completed application, and on the right I have the source code for index.html. Everything we're going to be looking at is in index.html, and if you wanted to, you could actually click on the demo and view the page source, and you could follow along without having to download this and open it in an IDE. The app layout and styling are coming from Bootstrap 5. We do have a little bit of custom styling in this styles.css file, but that's not important to how this demo works. The first thing I want to look at is these first three rows. In the first row, we have our active users and Geochannel ID. This is here at the top of the application. In the next row, we have a div for our map canvas. This map canvas is powered by Google Maps. And before you get started with this, if you were configuring it for yourself, you want to go all the way to the bottom of index.html, and you'll see an API key where you import the Google Maps API. You'll want to replace that API key with your key. In the third row, we have our buttons for creating a new session, as well as sending invites. After that, we have a row for settings and user details. This is where we can configure how we want the map to display, whether or not we want to share our location updates, and it also allows us to change our username and enter a greeting message that will be sent to all users. And that's it for the UX. It's actually fairly simple. So now let's take a look at the JavaScript. The first two functions in this file are a getParameterByName and a makeID function. The getParameterByName function is getting URL parameters from the URL. Normally this is the channel ID, and this allows you to share this URL and add more users to your channel. But you could also manually set a username here or a UUID here. Our makeID function is used to create a new channel ID if it's not provided. It's also used to generate a user's UUID or create an anonymous username if they didn't provide one. So the first thing we want to do is try to get the Geochannel. If we don't have that, then we just create a new ID. And then we're doing the same thing for the user's UUID and username. And we're also going to go ahead and save those to session storage. That way it doesn't have to be passed around in the URL. It makes it easier to share and copy. Next, we configure our PubNub instance. You want to replace this publish key and subscribe key with your key set. Next, we have our getLocation function. So this uses the browser navigator API to get the user's location and call this showPosition function whenever it changes. In showPosition, we are taking the updated latitude and longitude, and we are adding that along with our user's UUID, greeting, and username to a kind of master list of users saved to PubNub objects. We're also going to publish the update to our Geochannel and our Geochannel with our UUID. And we're using this more as for future proofing in case you wanted to play back a user's history of their movement, but it's not currently used in this app. Next, we have a collection of variables and arrays. We use this for storing our current location as well as storing the path if we're plotting it. And then we initialize our map with Google Maps. And this will populate the map in our map div. Now we have our redraw function. And so what this is going to do is redraw our map whenever we receive a new payload from PubNub. And so the first thing we want to do is make sure that the payload channel matches the Geochannel that we're in. And if it does, we'll want to add that point to our map. Additionally, we may want to plot paths. So if you have this plot new paths option turned on, it'll actually draw the history of a user as it's received. This redraw function also creates an info window, so you can click on a user and view details about them like their current latitude, longitude, and their greeting. One other thing that this redraw function does is it displays the message if a user's greeting is updated. And so if someone sends a new greeting, Instead of redrawing the map, we'll just display an alert, the message. Finally, we can subscribe to our PubNub Geochannel and add a listener, and this listener calls our redraw function. This listener also handles presence events, and when we have a new user, it updates the active users count. So everything so far is mostly focused on updating the UX after you've started the application. But what about when you've opened it and there's already people in it? Well, we need to both get a count of the current users and we need to load all of the previous history. So we'll start with a PubNub here now call, and we'll use the response from that to initially populate our active label. In this load last locations function, we'll use PubNub objects to get that master user list, and then we'll populate all of those users to our map. The next two functions here are helper functions used by the email invite link and copy invite link just to make things a little easier for us. This is validating emails, that's helping copy text to clipboard. I'm not going to focus on that. Next, we have our event listeners for our buttons. So the first button we're going to look at is our create new session button. And so this is interesting because it basically restarts our application from scratch. So we're removing all of the data that's populated in the map. We're creating a new channel ID, and then we're resubscribing to that new channel ID for a fresh restart. And of course, we're publishing the first update so that there's some data to display on the map. The event listeners for our invite link buttons both work kind of similar. They're basically just sharing the window URL either by putting it in your clipboard or generating an email for you just to make it easier to share. Our change username button updates our local session storage, and it also updates our PubNub objects master user list with our new username. And then it publishes the latest lat long for that user to display on the map. Our send greeting function just takes the text from that input and publishes it to the .greet channel, which is then displayed by all users in that redraw function that we looked at earlier. There is some additional stuff in this file, but it's all used for the demo on pubnub.com. It doesn't actually do anything for the rest of the application, so I'm not going to cover it. And that is our GeoTrack application.